We have several programs that we call immersive learning opportunities for students. We have a professor who's been taking students to Ghana, West Africa for a dozen years, and I have the privilege of assisting her with that program. And it's quite unique, which I'll tell you about. But in addition to that, Mark and colleagues recently took students to Cordova, Alaska to look at climate change. And I just had the real privilege of taking 20 students to Havana, Cuba for spring break. So let's start by just showing you a bit of some clips from those two trips. Great. So the first tip would be team selection, picking the right students. These are incredible experiences and opportunities, but they're also potentially disastrous if you have the wrong students there. And so we go through quite a selection process. And one of the things that I do is I typically will document highlights from the trip, and I will take those and show them in classes that we have like J100, where there are 300 freshmen. And it becomes this aspirational moment where students will come up afterwards and they will be bugging you for 2 years to the date to when they can participate in these kinds of opportunities. So that's one of the things that we do. Another thing is just in terms of preparing the students. We assemble work teams before we go. Typically there'll be like 2 or 3 sessions the term before the trip. It provides a bonding opportunity for students to get to know each other, and also we have the students do research assignments where they find out information about the culture and history of the place that we're going to and make presentations to the class so that we are not just helicoptering in, but we're actually informed about where we're going before we get there. Mark?
So with the Alaska project, I have 2 big takeaways from this, and one of them is workflow. But to talk about workflow, I need to talk about the situation a little bit. I've heard a lot of really interesting tech stuff here today. We were in a tremendously disconnected place. So a town of 2,200 people whose central kind of core focus is on salmon and a very profitable port. I lived in a house with 22 other people for about a month in July. It's the last time I had lived with 15 other 22-year-olds. Was here in Columbia, Missouri, more than 20 years ago, which was interesting. We had we didn't have great connectivity, so we couldn't use too much in the way of cloud sources. But we had a few things that was also a thing that was really going for us. We had whiteboards everywhere. It didn't get dark, really, which was actually pretty helpful for production. And there was a bear that roamed on the road between the cannery where we were living in and the town where the bars were. So it really helped people kind of focus in the wee hours. So these are things we had going for us, and this is definitely not stuff that you can replicate in a classroom anywhere. But one of the things but it did become a classroom, which was really cool. But one of the things that we learned right away with this is that we had 19 students, 18 students, producing content over a month period of time. So you can imagine how much stuff. It ended up being 3 terabytes. The workflow. And just the one takeaway for that, we had lots of things that we learned, but we appointed one student and called him Lord Drobo. If any of you are familiar with the Drobo array drive, and he had a system of heaven, hell, and purgatory that we followed every single night. as we went through and collected this information and built these resources. The second piece is publication. And this, I think, gets to one of the other big challenges that we addressed with this, because we really wanted to think very differently about how to do stories about climate change. And that was to really peel it down to scientists, policymakers, and constituents at the very, very micro level. So people who were, the researchers who were in the field, the fishing industry folks who were living in the town, and the policymakers who were the federal agencies and state agencies there. We were able to dive into those, but how are we going to present them? Well, that presentation process started when we all showed up at the house. And we had strategic communicators, advertising students, journalists, photojournalists, videographers, writers. We had a watercolor artist, which we were kind of like, how are we going to use a watercolor artist for this? Well, let's give it a shot. Because we were all compressed and all in that space, we really took this design-centered approach to what we were doing, and most people were in most meetings at all times and moving forward, and we really thought differently about how we were producing stories. It wasn't a little group over here producing a story, dropping it, and going on to the next thing. It was the whole look and feel of the thing evolved as we went forward. And so I think it was a really exciting thing for us to do and build on as the term went on. That said, we had to have a deadline, because something had to be posted. So the trustees of the university wanted to see where their money was going, which happened on October 15th. And so we had a very hard moment to hit. And that kind of moved us beyond, I think one of the things that's kind of risky with a project like this is that it can become tourism. So we really wanted it to be journalism and not tourism, and focus on building new stories. And we're going to be going back again this summer, and hopefully the following summer. So,
Great. Thank you.
Any questions for those two? Funding the money. Where's the money coming from?
So
for the Alaska project, we had 2 internal grants from the University of Oregon and some external funding from external donors who were enthusiastic about the project. So we've been just cobbling it together in various places. We won a Research Innovation Award this year from the university as well on the stuff that we produced, which was the first time the journalism school has won that that I know of, so which is kind of cool.
And for Cuba and Ghana, the students pay to go on those trips, but we offer some partial scholarships.